Foreshortening, by the way, is also, well, it's helpful to think of it conceptually because you can copy what you think you see, but when you think about what you see, it gets us back to the difference between, say, this and this. Again, it's a perception thing. If you're inclined to see shape, then you're probably not going to really see around the form and take advantage of the things that help you with the spatial foreshortening. So when we think about it that way, we need to bring in the concept of volumes here. So if we take something that's been foreshortened, you may remember I was talking about things like that. If we put one form in front of another, now there may be a direction here, but it's confusing at this point as to which is in front of which, because we haven't attended to what's happening at the intersection. The moment we do, we can say, well, this one's in front of this one, and that one's in front of that one. We could have just as easily said this is in front of this one, and this one is still in front of this one. Or we could have said the center one is in front, and the others are behind. It all depends on how we handle the intersections. So once that's understood, I think then we can move on. Now, you might have, you also want to remember that even though we're talking like this, it isn't necessarily that each one of these segments is the same size. We're not doing Michelin Man here. And also, that's a very bumpy road. So we can have different sizes, but we can also have the way how one thing flows into another. For instance, this one can be more open, closed, closed, open, open, closed. So now notice there's a big difference. This is a very bumpy road. Boom, boom. These are a series of ones. One, 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 one. Kind of boring. And one might refer to it as the timing. That might be like the drum beat behind a melody or something. In this case, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2. So we call that timing in music. And you can see that it has its visual alias. So here we're looking at something that also has timing. It does this, 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 and this, right? It doesn't really even have to go in a straight line. We can take it around rhythmically, right? So maybe we want to close these. So we get 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and so on. But we're also making a rhythm out of it. And it also has a feeling of going into space. So if you look at these arrows, you see that in this case, it feels like it goes into the picture plane. We're using this kind of a volume in order to express an idea. But it could just as easily be, say, something like this. Here's the top surface. Against something like this. Against maybe something like this. And maybe even something like this. Something like this. Something like this. Right? See, so you can have a variety of different kinds of shape volumes. So again, it's just an idea. And you'll notice that in this case, it's 1, but it's a flat 1, round 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, and so on. Okay, let's play around with this idea a little bit. So let's take these ideas. Let's just start with something. Let's play. We've got a form into another form. We'll come down here. Let's across the form. Maybe something like that. So not terribly foreshortened, but enough foreshortening in it. So you notice I'm thinking, well, what's the subject doing? this case, our subject is reclining, and I'm basically trying to find out what the basic statement is, the feeling for it. All right, I'm going now for my center lines, right? Finding these things. Intersections, kind of like this. Hip bones, under, and across. Okay, so you see that slowly I'm beginning to develop something. And let's find the rib cage here. Feeling it out. Center lines. Again, all this is rather sketchy at this particular point as I'm trying to decide what it is to do. Here's that ovoid, by the way. You could do this. Right, say something like that. This leg is cylindrical, you see, kind of ovoid. So I'm not getting too involved. In description, still just trying to feel our way. Cross axis. And this, by the way, this is putting pressure here. So it's forcing some tension around this way. Forces this to here, center. All right. So coming down. All right. So when I start to look at this as a piece of foreshortening, I'm really doing the same thing. We're saying, well, what's in front and what's behind? It's this, basically this rule. The only thing I might add to that is that between these two big forms, there's a transitional form. So if this is the A form and this is the B form, this here is the transitional form, right? So how would that look here? Well, we might see the hip pulling around this way, and it goes under, right? And then maybe we see the latissimus pulling around, and we feel the rib cage in here. So in between those two, coming down this way, and between the hip and this, we'll find a transitional form. And in here, pulling down this way, from here to here, between these two big forms, there's a transitional form. So it's not big form into big form so much, you see. Transitional form right here. Right. Okay, transitional. All right, so we're just feeling our way out. Feeling our way out around the form. And again here, we're feeling this whole thing pull in front. So this isn't, I wouldn't consider this as just a linear movement, right? But I'm seeing this tucks under, right, as the quadriceps pull in front. Right? And tendon pulls here, ties in here, as this tucks under, right? Pulling down along the shin. So that's the, I'm thinking around the form. So this is back, this is in front, this is the closest thing to us. This is close. I'm finding the center. Right. This is tucking, so we could throw a little tone on it. By throwing a little tone on it, it creates a little atmosphere, you see. So we're doing this and this. It gives it a feeling, more of a feeling of space. So it's in this spirit that we began to just explore using this idea. And you can use this idea to interpret the subject's position in front of you. It could be very complex. But when we start thinking about this, one thing into another, it gives you a great tool for interpreting very complex things. For instance, twist, twist. See, without going into any real detailed description, you begin to feel the push and tug and what's in front of what by the choices we're making about this. Bring this up with the head back here. Behind. By the way, this one gets us a little bit into hidden form, and let's talk about that next. Talk about that next. Talk about that next. Talk about that. So, hidden form, concealed form. We're dealing with parts of the body which are actually very important for establishing balance, for establishing the main sense and weight of the figure, that are lost behind incidental movements of the arms and legs or whatever, and are not attended to by the artist. What I'm suggesting is that you deal with those concealed forms before you build the smaller forms that are in front, such as arms and limbs and so on. Let's take a look at that as a possibility. Let's take a figure. Let's take upper torso. We'll have a sitting figure like this, sitting on this edge. Really what we'll probably have is arms and legs in front, going around, hip high. So I'm thinking about it, even though I'm going to build a leg in this way and a leg up this way, across in front. See, now I'm seeing very little of what's behind. And as this is twisting, I'm going to bring it back. Upper torso. The head might even be somewhat tucked as the arm raises up. Foreshortened. Now we have foreshortening. This arm cuts across, let's say. And we're attempting then to find out what's going on here with the underlying form before we invest too much in what we're seeing in front. Now, let's say the other arm is here. So we've got this, and it's also hard to see the underlying form because even the breasts are up front. And the breasts are not really showing structure so much. Like the arms and the legs, they're obscuring the support forms, the main structure of the body. But I'm going to find it here in the navel, where the rib cage hits here. So that in some ways it peeks out, up and around the shoulder. This arm, let's say, comes back this way, in front. Again, this is foreshortened. I have a little bit of the head showing. So you see that even as we draw this, it does respect where it's coming from, each one of those things. I'm not just drawing the knee and the shin bone and down. We're actually asking, where does it come from? How does it attach? We can see possibly that this one This kind of lays across here, by the way. That this one is coming toward us, and then it moves back. So now, on analysis, this first line, I'm going to leave it. It's a first gestural thought. And try to see how this tucks in, because this is pulling back this way. And I want to feel the tension right up here. And I can feel it best if I can actually come all the way back and find it in the rib cage. Right. So I'm starting to feel it all the way down over here, even to the crotch. I'm going to let that fall over to the crotch. We're building in, building in. Heel. Again, there's some foreshortening, see? So we're doing this. In other words, this is in front of this. This is in front of that. And so on. And here we have concealed forms. Up here, foreshortened arm. Get maybe some of the bones in here. Right. So you see, we're just handling the situation rather than ignoring the situation. And pulling up, head pulling down, elbow to the wrist. Again, your general model will give you some distances. What the general model won't give you is how to deal with foreshortening. That's why it's a different conceptual notion about foreshortening. When you're bending the lengths or the widths of things, it's hard to measure them against other things because you're not seeing them flat on. You're not seeing their full lengths. When you do a general model, it is basically dealing with the full lengths of things. You're measuring one body part against another body part. I didn't say this yet, but in formulation, which is the second part, we talked about that it's a place where you take measure. But there are 10 different ways to take measure. And one of them is to do this general model we talked about. Another one is, for instance, to understand shape and volume and its direction. That is a form of measurement about what's happening spatially, right? So those are 2 forms of measurement. Now, I'll talk about a couple more. We're still just finishing on the concealed form issue, right? Okay. So we give this some weight, and we begin to feel that this is not lost, that in here we feel the whole figure. We're not cheating out on this. We're attending to it. All right. So another form of measurement might be to say, measure this against horizontals and verticals, as if we were measuring it with a picture plane. So what I see is that this is on an angle, and this is on an angle. I might even come in here and say, this shape in here is something like this. Right? I could even drop down and say, well, this elbow sort of hits this hip about this point. And then I might go, oh, I've got to bring that out a little bit or it's not going to quite find its place. This elbow might line up with the ankle down here, right? There might be a negative space in here which has a certain shape. That shape might include an angle like that, an angle like that, an angle like that. And against a vertical or a horizontal, right? So we're actually measuring negative, positive. We're measuring volumes. This is coming forward toward us, right? We're measuring in a series of different ways. So each one of these things is something that you come to with thought, with analysis, which leads to concepts and visual ideas that are extremely useful for dealing with your form. In this particular case, we're dealing with forms that the eye does not see. We have to surmise them. They're built out of our ideas about form. Our general model should give us some of those simple ideas, and so on.